Welcome to the Heart Path Podcast. I'm your host, Yvonne Ellis. The Heart Path Podcast spotlights authors, changemakers, nature lovers, and creators of all kinds. Each of our podcasts aim to share interviews and stories of beauty, resilience, and inspiration for all. This week's guest is Deb Matlock. Deb is a nature-based guide, educator, and facilitator with over 25 years of experience helping people deepen their relationship with the more than human world. Through her business, Wild Rhythms, she offers professional trainings, retreats, and programs grounded in connection with Earth. You can find Deb's work and offerings at wild-rhythms.com. Hello, Deb. Can we talk a little bit about what inspired you to start Wild Rhythms and where you went from there?
Absolutely. I'm so honored to be here chatting with you today. So thank you so much for having me on. You know, it's a funny story how Wild Rhythms started. It was 2003, and I was working with organizations as an environmental educator. And I had this yearning in my heart that I wanted to be able to do certain kinds of programs that that were related to spiritual connection to place and the more than human voice. Some of these concepts were coming to me, but I wasn't working for anybody where that would be an appropriate content area. I loved what I was doing, but I wanted to be able to stretch the edge. And I thought, I guess I need to create a container. And so I'm probably the most reluctant entrepreneur that I personally know, because I thought, I'm not a business owner. I don't know anything about running a business. And back in that day, I actually had to go into the Secretary of State office in Denver. So this is before all the lovely internet forums. I had heard the name Wild Rhythms, and it felt really good in my heart. And I just landed it. I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to register. So I went in and I registered, did all the forms, paid the $10 or whatever it was, walked out, and I looked at the form and I was like, what in the world is this that I just did? Like, I don't know what this is. But the name from that day to this day, still, it feels so resonant. And what I've learned over the years is that I think it's kind of its own entity. And sometimes I'm at the helm, and a lot of times I'm trying to keep up and say, wait, what are we doing? Wait, where are we going? So that's a short version of how and why it started up.
I love that. What were you doing at that time?
Let me think back. So at that time, I was finishing graduate school in environmental ed. I think I graduated in 2003. So this was sort of the first thing I did. And my research at that time was the rhythmic connection between people and place. And so through that research for my thesis, I had started to envision this little organization business thing. I was also working as a seasonal at Colorado State Parks, and I was trying to find jobs in environmental ed and just putting pieces together post-graduate school. So it was kind of a unique time where I had just done all this research, which was really stimulating and inspiring, and made me realize that our connection to land and wildlife throughout humanity has been very rhythmic, whether that's through dance and drumming or through attention to seasons or moon cycles or day and night cycles or water. Looking back, I couldn't find a single culture that didn't trace all the way back to roots with what I personally would think of as rhythm and connection. And so I started looking at rhythm as a definition that was much bigger than, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I was a dancer, so I had this very dancerly rhythm understanding. But what this did was blow my mind to the fact that to be alive is to be in a dance and to be in rhythm. And so all of that was happening while I was a seasonal interpreter at a park in a winter season where we had low visitation. So I had lots of time to sit and think. A lot of times it was me looking out the window at a blizzard and shoveling off the deck at the visitor center. So lots of creative space at those moments,
Yeah. So what were the steps that you took moving forward? What were your ideas when you first began?
When I first began, I think my primary idea was arts-based environmental ed program design and consulting. And because oddly, that sounds so strange to me now, because now in environmental ed and nature connection work, arts are very well integrated. But in 2003, it was not always the case. It was much more of a science. And there were a few centers that were art and ecology centers, and they were kind of cutting edge back in those days. So I got really excited. I had an eco-psychology background from my graduate program, and I really wanted to integrate that art, eco-psychology, relational component into program design. And so I started that way because I was working as an environmental educator. That's where my professional connections were. So I joke, but I think my first few jobs, people didn't even know I had a business or a website. They just hired me. And it was like, oh, can you make a checkout to Wild Rhythms instead of Deb Matlock? And they're like, oh, you have a business? I was terrible at marketing and getting off the ground, but I wanted a place to do the creative programming and be able to do it in a way that nobody could have oversight. Now, obviously, my first few clients, I was working for organizations, so I did work with what they were looking for. But I also had then at that point, I had the structure in place, the liability insurance, to be able to say, I'm going to lead a workshop on this idea and let me just see who shows up. If anybody's even interested in this, let's go out and do art and talk to plants. Yeah. Okay, let's see. So then it was a clunky path through there because it also has responded and changed over the years as I've changed and grown. And I went through a period of time where I realized my environmental ed professional life and my own personal spiritual life were parallel, but they were not intersecting. Mm-hmm. I was keeping the spiritual side of my nature connection work very protected. And I was very afraid of being considered woo-woo and all the things. And finally, I hit this place where it was like, you know what? I need to be honest about this. My work needs me to show up and I can't keep splitting myself. So I went through a scary 2-3 years where I was like, all right, I'm just going to start putting these kind of presentations into conferences and I'm going to start presenting for groups and people are going to like it or they're not. Luckily, it didn't fully backfire, but oh my goodness, the process of that, the vulnerability, I wanted to crawl under a rock because I thought I can't be this authentic because I'm taking a major risk in a culture that doesn't honor the fact that it's possible that we can have these deep spiritual connections and that the more than human world actually can interact with us in multiple ways and it's synergistic. And
wow, that's so beautiful. And I know that it was scary. I understand that for sure because there's a societal expectation of how things should be or how they should go, but there's also the internal understanding of what you need to do for yourself moving forward and how you're going to get to this world. And it's okay if it doesn't look the way people expect it to. It's perfectly good for you to follow your own path. I'm so glad you did that. And I would love to know how you did. How you integrated everything together from the spiritual, personal side to the work that you were already doing.
Yeah, that is a great question. And there's definitely not an easy answer to it because it was a clunky path of experimentation and, diverting off into the dark woods and then coming back and realizing I was on an entirely different path. And one thing I did for a lot of years was I worked for city municipalities, open space. And I realized early on that I had two options with Wild Rhythms. One is I could do whatever I could to make money. And that might mean doing some things that were not necessarily what I wanted to do. And I could throw all in on that early on. Or I could say, this is something I'm going to do part-time and I'm going to have a regular income from this other job. Partly out of fear and opportunity and necessity, I made that choice. So for a good decade, I worked at other organization here in Boulder. And I actually appreciate that because professionally, I continued to grow my skills and my network. And then when I did decide to fully leap into Wild Rhythms, I had developed a lot more work. I had developed a bigger community. I was a little more prepared. And I didn't have to sell out Wild Rhythms the way I might have had to had I made a different choice. Because I mean, this is not a multi-million-dollar business at this point, and maybe it never will be. I don't want to tell the universe it can't be, but that's not kind of my intention here. So part of it was I took care of my needs, doing work that I believed in, and that was in alignment. I was an educator naturalist for 15 years, but also experimenting and taking these risks. In some programs, like, for example, when I was doing something that I felt particularly vulnerable about, like weaving in the first workshop I led on nature communication, I invited friends to come try it. That's how scared I was. And then I slowly expanded that circle to clients I was comfortable with and charging a little bit. and then getting to where now it's like, I'll just put it out there and take it or leave it kind of thing. If people resonate, great. And if it's not for them, that's totally fine too. When I work with people who are creating their own kind of work, one of the things I say is it's perfectly valid to say, what is my growth edge and also appropriate comfort level right now? We can push our growth edge a little bit, but we've also got to keep ourselves in a place we can do the work. And so a lot of times getting a friendly group of people to try something really new and different is a good way to do that. Because if it all goes out the window, you can just go on a fun hike together or whatever, like, okay, that was terrible. Let's go walking and have lunch.
Yes, yes, yes. What were those earlier versions about? What were you providing at that time for your friends?
Yeah, the very early vulnerable stuff that I was really nervous about had to do with interacting with the world of spirit, spiritual guidance, that connection, interfacing with the more than human world, the spirit of wild nature, the world of spirit, and all of its mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that is the heart of my work. And also to be in that space, I had to get to the place of being comfortable with the fact that it's a mystery and there's a lot of unknowns around it. And I had to get comfortable with how do I help people find what's authentic for them? Because one thing I can say about all that work is that nobody can tell anybody else how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
We can accompany each other. We can facilitate opportunity for exploration. We can companion. When I work with clients, I don't consider myself a teacher. I consider myself a partner, a companion, somebody to debrief and help to ask questions to deepen. But I'm not going to say, here's exactly how you go out and talk to wild nature. There's one way and this is it, like forget it. So I had to get very comfortable on my own as a facilitator and as a professional to saying, all right, I have to be cool with there being a lot of space here that isn't solid. And coming from my educator background where I was designing programs and curriculums and I had a really solid grasp, I had to locate myself differently as a facilitator so that I could provide opportunities for people to have their own very authentic and meaningful experiences. Because if I were telling them what it was supposed to be like, I could totally short circuit whatever was actually emerging between them and the wild place where we were. One of the most important things I've learned early on in my nature connection career is that my job is to create experience and then get the heck out of the way. Put it together, keep it safe, make sure people all come back, all the things, have the medical training, have the facilitation training, know how to create programming, and then know when to step back and just say, all right, you go over there and you interact. And I'm here to catch on the other side. We'll debrief this. But I'm not here to control that experience for you. And that was a growth edge in a big way. I had to get myself there.
I love that. How did you find that edge between allowing them to have their own experience, but also leading that experience?
Ooh, that is a great question. That's like a $2 million facilitator question. I think there's a few levels to the answer. One of them is working deeply in collaboration with the wild places where I'm working. Going in and knowing that I could have the same outline for a program at 3 different places, and it's going to be 3 very different programs. If I'm doing the work well, and I'm partnering with wild nature, and I'm partnering with the world of spirit, making sure that I'm centering myself in that place of service and not of expert overlord, or for lack of any more eloquent way to say it. That's a balance, again, as a facilitator to work with. We do have to be good at what we do. We have to know how to craft programming. We have to have the ability to be flexible in the moment. And that requires experience and a toolbox of opportunities to go, oh, actually, what would be better for this group is this other activity that I wasn't planning on doing today, but I can bring that in right now. Ecology is dynamic. The world is changing constantly. My backyard today is very different than yesterday. The leaves are in a different place and the birds. We have to be in that space of collaboration. The other piece of it is we have to be in the space of willing to take the risk, knowing that, okay, I have enough to offer here. I can get this group through this. And working for myself early on, one of the things, this probably sound funny, that I said to myself is the worst that will happen is that people will be unhappy and I'll refund their money. Yeah. I'm not going to do anything risky and dangerous. If somebody's really upset and really hated this workshop, I'll feel bad. It'll be hard, but I'll reflect and I'll fix it. Honestly, I've never had anybody after a workshop come and complain like that. We have that power in ourselves. If somebody isn't working for them, either I can create a different experience for that one person, And I have done that before where somebody was like, I just need to be separate from the group. And I was like, okay, cool, let's talk. And they're going to be here and you can go over here and I'll help you create a different experience. And then the other thing I think is just constantly growing. I think the minute I say to myself, I know everything there is about being a nature connection practitioner is the minute I should stop doing it. I'm going to go to my grave knowing a fraction of what's possible regarding people's connection to the wild world and the world of spirit. And so if I can say to myself, I'm committed to that continual growth, then my programming will continually grow theoretically. Ask me whenever the end is, and I'll tell you if that theory worked, but I think it makes sense.
Definitely makes sense. And it makes me want to talk a little bit more about your offerings now with Wild Rhythms and how they've changed and what you're doing now with Wild Rhythms.
Yeah, they've changed a lot over time. Right now, I have a few key kind of areas of offering. I do a lot of work with nature connection practitioners. I have a several month cohort for people who are trying to create their own unique body of work and need a little bit of structure, a little bit of a community around that, but they're ultimately trying to bring their experiences in, weave it together into something that only they can offer. The integrity and the awareness can be missed in nature connection work. We need to understand ecology. We need to understand how to work with places responsibly, leave no trace, the integrity of being in this work. How do we do it in a way that's not extractive? We're not just taking from the land, but it's more synergistic. How are we actually engaging in a relationship that will also benefit the places? So that is kind of the heart of the practitioner piece. I do a lot of nature journaling work. I do public workshops and retreats around sacred nature connection. And then I do one-on-one work for people who want to dig into their own spiritual journey with the wild natural world, or their own connection to, say, their dogs or cats. I do animal communication work. So there's a lot of different things, but when I look at them all, the thread that moves through them is engaging with the more than human world in a way that I like to say is decentering, but not devaluing the human. So kind of elevating the more than human voice. How do we see ourselves and our understanding of community to include all of the world around us, not just the human world? That is a thread that brings all those pieces together. And then whether people want to offer work themselves and create their own, or they're looking on a personal journey of their own development, I try to pull pieces in. And so that's kind of where it's landed. And it's moved from, as I mentioned before, the arts-based, and then I kind of went into a little bit more spiritually focused stuff that was mostly spiritual guidance work, but then kind of settling into where it is now actually feels like kind of where the life's work is landing. Do I know what 10 years is going to look like from now? No, but my gut feeling is that this is the heart of it. Now, this is weaving all the paths together. And so I'm sure that work will continue to morph in the coming years, but that more than human component is really at the core of what I'm feeling called to offer and bring to the world in whatever way I can, little ways that one person can do it.
Do you have any advice for people, ways that they can strengthen their connection with nature moving forward?
Oh gosh, yeah. I think there's some simple ways that take as much time as we want, but as little as we have. One thing that I enjoy doing and I recommend to people is to pick like a daily or a weekly theme. Say, for example, clouds. I'm going to notice clouds every time I go outside, whether I'm running to my car trying to make a meeting, or I'm waiting for my kid at soccer practice, or I'm walking my dog. My focus today is going to be clouds, the patterns, shapes, the movements, the expression. What am I learning about the world around me from this? And the daily topic theme idea is endless. It could be clouds, it could be leaves, it could be ants, it could be birds, it could be robins. If people have a hard time coming up with a theme, what I kind of like to do is take like a mason jar or a bowl and just write on pieces of paper, rocks, dirt, fall leaves, flowers, and just stick them in the bowl. And then each morning you could pick one. Like, oh, okay, today's ants. Now, if you pick ants and it's winter, you might want to put that back in and pick another one, but it can take away the decision if it's hard. So that's one thing that's easy to do. It doesn't require extra time. It doesn't cost anything. And no matter where we are, big city, rural town, wilderness area, urban center, no matter where we are, the natural world is all around us. And if we deliberately choose to notice I really believe we will start a relationship, we'll deepen our relationship, will be impacted. Our rhythm might slow down and match the clouds just a little bit more that day that we're looking at clouds. And maybe instead of heads down, rushing through the streets, trying to get from one meeting to a next, maybe we walk a little slower and we just look at the amazing beauty around us that is free and available no matter where we are.
Yeah.
And I think that is super empowering. I do that all the time. It just helps me focus because it's really easy to get stuck in everything spinning in my mind to say, actually, I'm going to go look at clouds as I'm walking my dog this morning. Great. I'm focusing on clouds, not everything I didn't get done yesterday,
I love that. And it's a great way to focus your mind and be present and enjoy what's actually around you. Do you have people write into this at all, or is it more of a thought kind of action that you're inspired?
I think writing is perfect. I would say most of my workshops have a journaling component. So, for example, this is a great point. If somebody wanted to deepen that a little bit, they could say, I'm going to carry my journal, or I'm going to spend whatever, 20 minutes, 30 minutes each afternoon focusing on my topic or my theme. That one topic could be a 4-day retreat. Somebody could write and do artwork and go into deep visioning with clouds. So it can start from, I'm just going to be aware of this, to this is going to be my deeper apprenticeship. I'm going to be focusing on clouds for the whole year and learn everything I can, engage in all these different ways. And clouds have a lot of colors and shapes. And if you were to take paints or pastels or colored pencils, we're going to look at the world differently if we slow down a little bit and dig into that. That's one of the things I love about nature journaling is that all of a sudden, everything starts to look more complex and rich when it might have just been a rock half an hour ago. And now we see that there's 50 colors and all these shapes and a jagged edge over here. And then why is that side smooth and that side's jagged? And we start to get into the questioning, how did this rock get here? So yeah, I love that question because one of these things can expand into the rest of our lives if we want it to.
I love the layering that can happen through that process and the presence of it. And while you were speaking, I was thinking about your practitioner training.
Yeah, this is a training I offer every fall. It's a 7-month cohort, small cohorts, because it's a lot of one-on-one work as well. So, it's not like 100%. I couldn't pull that off. But what it is it's for people who have a community or a small business, or maybe they have a little bit of experience leading outdoor wilderness workshops for a nonprofit and they want to create something for themselves to offer. But it's about bringing in people's eco-spiritual journey, their own connection to wild nature, their own sense of spirituality and how that intersects around their nature connection, bringing that forward to create their own unique offering. Nature connection work needs to be unique and creative. It's not a standardizable thing because places are changing and people are changing and the world is changing. And a program that I lead today is different than the same program 10 years ago because the world is different and people come with different feelings about things. And, the world right now, there's a lot of political angst and people bring that in and that you can't just ignore where people come from. So we want to bring in a body of work that they want to offer that is unique to them and the places and the people. And then in the program, we also go through building out parts of it, which is a little bit different for each person, program design and facilitation techniques. And then depending on where people are in that journey, they could also offer parts of it and then come back and debrief it. So the program includes every other week group Zoom calls and then private sessions and online back and forth consulting. I have a lot of people, we use Google Docs, for example, a lot of times where we're in a constant communication as they're building a program and we're commenting back and forth over several days as people are building pieces. And so I designed it to be a graduate cohort for people who don't need or want to go back to graduate school. So there is a little bit of a theoretical component of concepts that often get stuck behind the wall of academia, like deep ecology, spiritual ecology, things that I think if people have a little bit of a working understanding of, they can weave these kinds of things into their program to deepen their program and create more effective programming. It's one thing to say, I'm going to go out and have a sensory awareness experience in the woods, which is great, absolutely great. It's another thing to craft that sensory awareness program with an understanding of the theoretical foundations. with an understanding of what part of ourselves we're bringing forward as facilitators, with an understanding of how to collaborate with Wild Place, then all of a sudden it's not just a bunch of sensory awareness activities, it's an integrated experience with the person and their relationship to place at the center, and our job as facilitators being in service of that. So this practitioner training is trying to create that space for people to build that with a little bit of a community, a little bit of structure. Because sometimes when we get ideas, it's hard to make them come down to earth. It's really great. Visionary ideas are wonderful, but then what are those steps to get the rubber hitting the road, so to speak?
I love all of the work you're doing. I'm amazed by everything that you're creating and what you've created over time and how that's evolved. And I would love to share with listeners what you're going to be providing in the upcoming Field Writing Institute workshop.
Oh, I'm so excited to do that. I'm so grateful for the invitation. We are going to do a little workshop focusing on how we find our own wild rhythms, our own natural rhythms, especially living in the modern Western world where a whole lot of what is demanded of us is kind of counter to our own authentic wild rhythms. And one of the things that fascinates me is how do we get deep awareness to deepen our connection to the world around us? And then how do we pull the pieces of that we can into our lives? Because most of us, myself included, are not just going to go live in a cave on a mountainside and live in our own wild rhythms. There are definitely days that sounds very idyllic to me. But the truth of the matter is a lot of us have appointments at 1:00 and kids to pick up and dogs to go to the vet. And, we have our lives, and those are beautiful too. What I want to explore in that workshop is reflection and some activities to dial in what kind of rhythmic guidance are we each getting from the world around us? Mm-hmm. How does that fit into what we feel is truly authentic for ourselves? And what parts of that can we pull with us into the plate that is our life today? And now if somebody wants to go to a cave, more power to them, but most of us can't. So how do we pull it in so that we can feel that connection every day, be aware of it? And how do we build it in? There are lots of examples for that. There's lots of ways that we can live our lives and fulfill our obligations and show up for our families and our communities, and also show up for our wild selves and show up for that sacred relationship we have with the wild world around us. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive at all. In fact, I think when they all blend together, that is a really powerful place. When we're integrating and showing up in the world in service and in support, that's when it's like hardcore rock and roll. We're not isolating and we're not ignoring the wildness. We're saying, all right, what does it look like for me to pull these together? So I'm really looking forward to that workshop in November and getting to explore that with folks.
I'm really looking forward to it as well. I'm excited to be able to be a part of it too.
Well, honestly, I feel like this is true. We often do the work we need in the world. I'll be the first to say that everything I offer in the world is work I also need. So like every time I teach a workshop that focuses on wild rhythms, it's a good reminder for me too, because there's a lot of demands on all of us trying to pull us away from that. Mm-hmm. And there's this amazing world around us saying, hey, you know what? There are some seriously powerful rhythms out here that you could learn from and integrate. Like, flowers don't bloom 365 days a year. They need to go dormant for part of the year. The roots have to gather, like we can look out there and give ourselves a little bit of permission to flow into the rhythmic world a little bit.
I'd love to hear how we can cultivate our wild selves moving forward.
Yeah, I love that question. And I can tell you first that I would say that journey for me personally is a huge part of what I think I'll be exploring forever. Getting to know my wild self is more and more learning how to respond and honor what that part of me is bringing forward. And I think it's the part of us that is very naturally attached and connected to the wild world and the rhythms and the cycles and the seasons, and the part of us that is animalistic in a way that is so wholesome and real, because we are animals. And so that part of us that hasn't forgotten that we can look into the eyes of a coyote or our dog or the squirrel on our windowsill and see a kinship, see a relationship. The part of us that is also going to get irritable on the 8th meeting of a day where we feel like nothing's happening and we really just want to get outside. That part of us is like, you know what, forget this. I'm just not doing this. I'm going to turn off my computer and go do this. That part of us that keeps us connected, the part of us that says you have to get up and move your body. The part of us that says, you know what? You are tired. So stop. Go lay down. It is not a crime to be tired. And as I say that, I will tell you, I need to hear it. I am not sitting here like, oh, I have it figured out. I argue with myself about that practically daily because the world is loud and the wild self is going to keep reminding us. That's the part that allows us to get into those creative, gritty places. Speaking for myself, it's my wild self that says, all right, we're going to do this risky program. And it might fall flat and people might criticize it. People may think you've lost your marbles. Oh, well, we're going to do it. It's the place I know within myself that I can find that courage and that grounding. And it's the place I also know that if I ignore, the cost is going to be high, either in my health or my sanity or my happiness, or I'm going to get super irritable in random places because I'm ignoring this important part. But I think tapping into that is saying, what are my rhythms and what is it I'm yearning for? What do I feel like I really need to bring forward? And that my soul and my heart and my mind are all standing at the ready to go do. It's also the part where I think resistance comes from. And in a time in the world where we really are at a place that speaking up and resisting and saying, this is not okay, and this is the world I want instead, I think we have to tap into a part of ourselves that is deeply rooted and very courageous and very comfortable with understanding that wildness is not always skipping through tulips. In fact, it often isn't. Sometimes it says, I have to speak because if I don't, I am denying the truth of everything that is in my soul. I feel like a wild self and the wild soul exploration is an ongoing commitment to saying, I'm going to live in a way that's bigger than just myself. And I have to be willing to step into this darkness, the mud, the confusion, the light, the happiness, the inspiration. I have to be able to step into all of that and know the world around may or may not like it, but I can manage that too. I can manage whatever's thrown at me as I'm standing in this place. And the wild world shows us this all the time. We have all kinds of mentorship right outside our doors, and it's a threat, which is why I think most of us, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I know I was not taught that I had a wild soul as I was growing up. I was not taught that by the culture that is really happy for all of us to put our heads down and just produce. And don't you dare be innovative, and don't you dare question or challenge, and don't you dare say, wait a minute, what about this? Because when we do that, we become a threat. But I think that is where that gets me really excited.
Wow. Your work is so powerful. And what you just said, I could feel it in my entire being. It made me wonder what it was that helped you to pivot from that everyday expectation of the world of it needs to look this way to creating what you have with Wild Rhythms today?
Well, that's a good question. I want to be honest first up and say that the pivot is a process. I'm constantly having to work on that pivot because it's like a drug, external validation of, wow, that was lovely. And you got that done on time and this was perfect. And, the world reinforces that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. What made me continue to commit to Wild Rhythms through thick and thin is that it's not me. It's work that is coming through me. And I don't even always feel like there's a choice. Like my commitment, what I feel is important to me is, and I've said this prayer to the universe for decades now, is just please use me in whatever is the highest good. And I know that as a human, there's a really darn good chance I am not going to always know what the highest good is. I might think one thing is, and it might not be, and I have a human brain, which has limitations. And I have a human ego, which has a wonderful role to play for all of us, but also can work really hard to keep us very safe and very focused on what we know we can do and be successful at. And so part of where Wild Rhythms has come and where it is and where it will probably go is saying, what can I do right now to serve the highest good with the skills I have and the opportunities I have and the resources I have and the limitations I have, because we all have those too. So what can I do right now? And what is needed right now? And I just try my darn best to be humble in front of that. And I'm sure I'm not always hitting the mark, but that's the place I want to orient from. And that's where the ongoing pivot process has to come from is, I don't know for sure the meaning of life. I just know if I'm going to be here using resources to sustain my own life, I want to give back. So, okay, universe, here's a business. I've got the structure in place. Help me with inspiration. Let me just be open to the collaboration. And then take that and say, okay, I have the skill set and the experience to build this. I feel like my job is to keep the skill set and the experience going so that I can take these inspirations and know what to do with them.
I'm going through the same exact thing. It's definitely a calling that I feel to do the heart path. And that's why I haven't even come up with a title for myself yet. Really weird saying that I'm the business owner of the heart path, because I feel like the heart path is something that everyone has. Everyone has their own heart path. So to be the founder of the heart path feels weird as well. And I get it. I love what you're doing with Wild Rhythms. I am so grateful for your time today and all of the offerings that you're giving this world. And I can't wait for your workshop. I'm excited for your practitioner training coming up. I've really enjoyed listening to your story and what you're doing with Wild Rhythms. And I can't thank you enough for being here.
Oh, I'm honored and I appreciate the invitation. Same with your work. When I saw the heart path, I felt such a deep resonance and I could feel the truth of that journey. I could feel the love going into the creation. I also know the vulnerability part of it and the hard part about what do I call myself? That's been an ongoing thing too. So I get all that. And I want to reflect back to you. I'm so excited for the heart path and the work that you're doing and look forward to continued connections and collaborations around that.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it as well. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you so much.